Welcome to this week's edition of the Casual Shooters Podcast, your premier podcast for the casual shooter. Today's guest is what you would call an OG. What do I mean by OG? Well, he won his first USPSA National Championship more than 3 decades ago, the days when Jerry Barnhart and Rob Latham were in their prime. He's an IPSC World Champion and 10-time National Champion. Without further ado, why don't you join me in welcoming to the show Todd Jarrett. How you doing, Todd?
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing, brother? You doing all
Good.
right?
Yeah, I hope I did you all right by the intro.
Oh yeah. You missed a few nationals, but I
Oh,
tell
dang it.
everybody that. Yeah, I probably let me see. Yeah, I think I'm about 16. I would consider legit nationals over the years for me personally. I think So winning the first nationals in 1991 was pretty cool for me, and then turned around. See, I was second in 1993, and then won the world championship in '96 down in Brazil. Then I was second again at the next world shoot, and then second again, and then I was second again. There's some guy named Eric Graffel. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this guy or not.
Never heard of this guy.
He came out of the blue somewhere. I think he came from another planet, because the guy's still pretty damn good today.
Ridiculously good still today.
Yeah. So Eric and I are good friends. We chat, not all the time, but we do chat often, across Facebook, and we text each other from time to time. So he's got my new range up. He is doing well, and still he won the world championship again this year. I told him I'd give him a break. I wasn't going to show up, and so no, I just don't have the time anymore. I am running around doing 1,000 things with all these different companies that I work with, and I have another business that I also run here in the Richmond, in the Petersburg area. My father's been in business for decades in the HVAC business. So between that, I have a real estate business. I'm working for Staccato and Hoppies and CCI and Federal, and
Seymour.
What else? And Seymour. I mean, all these guys are keeping me busy, and then I try to train as much as I can because the wife loves it, still loves to shoot, and God forbid I got to crank the handle, here 3,000 rounds a week just to keep her happy. And so it's been I would say I'm a lot busier than I want to be. And then they called me up and said, "Hey, we want you to run for president for USPSA." And I was going "Yeah, I think I got 45 minutes a day left I can fill." So I thought I'd jump in on the USPSA side and give that a shot. There's a lot of great people running for that, and there's something we can chat about later if you'd like to.
I do. So what I normally do is there's, for you, there would normally be 3 parts. We're a little bit limited on time, and I don't want to cut back on the meat. So I'm going to cut out the first part, which is just their icebreaker questions, like favorite movies, favorite books, that type of thing. So we're going to jump right into the meat of things. When you and I were talking earlier, as I knew, you were from rural Virginia. So you probably grew up shooting guns, hunting, that type of thing.
Oh, I did. My father actually, I was tromping around in the woods with my dad when I was 5 years old, and so I always tell this story to my students, and for a little history background on myself. There was a time when I wanted like a semi-auto shotgun like my dad, and Dad goes, son, when you get big enough and you get strong enough to be able to handle one and maybe kill your first deer, then maybe that can happen. So my birthday's in November. So on my birthday at 7 years old, I got my first single barrel 20 gauge Stevens shotgun. Well, of course, I told Dad I was kind of disappointed that I didn't get a semi-auto shotgun like he has. He had a Model 51 Ithaca, which I actually own today. I still have. My dad doesn't shoot anymore. And so one thing led to another. After I got it, I'm hunting hard with Dad. We're hunting, and I hunt with a couple clubs down in Southeast Virginia, and I killed my first deer on December 7th, just a few weeks after that. And I said, Dad, you promised me that if I kill a deer, I might be able to get a semi-auto. And so on Christmas, which is basically 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, I ended up getting my first semi-auto 20 gauge, which I still own today. I still have it at the house. So that was my story of getting into
Wow.
shooting as a young child, and a kid today. If you tell a parent today they're going hunting with their kid at 7 years old, I don't think that would be something that we would probably actually probably approve of in this society we live in today. So that kind of kicked off that. So I shot. I was a big hunter for all the way through my teens. I love hunting. I did dog trials. I was in the I was majorly into coon hunting in competition side of dog handling at one time. I think
Wow.
I had 50 dogs at one time that I
Whoa.
took care of. So yeah, so I was really big into field trials, hunting dogs, deer hunting dogs, and then when I was 19 years old, I took another job from a company up in Richmond, and I got held up one night about 2 o'clock in the morning heading to work. So I was an HVAC mechanic, and then so guy stuck a gun in my face, opened up the door, and told me he was going to ride to downtown Richmond, and I was going like I didn't have nothing of it, so I punched the gas, went through a red light at 2:30 in the morning, and the guy was falling out, and I looked in the rearview mirror, I see a gun flying, and I went back and told my buddies at work what had happened, and they're like, "Hey man, you need to come hang out with us because we go to an indoor range up here in Richmond, and we shoot every Friday night." That's why I don't have a pistol. All I have is a shotgun. Well, come on, borrow our stuff. And that started me getting into the action shooting sports at a very young age. And then, of course, you couldn't even own a gun till you was 21 years of age at the time. But I had friends who, hey, Todd, borrow my gun, shoot this gun. So my very first gun was literally a Model 10 Smith and Wesson, but that I shot bowling pin matches with. And then one thing led to another. I was going like, well, I'm losing out here because you guys got like semi-autos, and so I bought my first Colt 45, and that kind of kicked off my career in the semi-auto game from when I was 7 years old until I was 20 years old. So that's kind of the story of my starting of USPSA anyway, or the action shooting sports.
Now, was your first match in USPSA then?
Wow, my first match, it was kind of funny I was telling the wife about this here a while back ago, and my first match that I ever shot was actually in March of '84. And it was I had been shooting bowling pins and some bastardized versions of action shooting because it was a little bit all over the place that time. So I show up, I'm the only guy there that's kind of like didn't know what was going on. Everybody was chatting, and I was kind of like that new guy. And I was going, what the hell is going on here? I said, okay, I understand that, here it is right here. So, okay, I'm sitting at a table. I have to flip over some cards. I have to pick up my gun off the table, and I shoot six shots or three targets across the table, go through a doorway, which is only like 4 or 5 feet away. And then there's three more targets. There's only 12 rounds. So I get back home and I go like, wow, I wonder how I did in the match because there was only one stage. And so, but you could
Mm.
shoot a pocket gun, you could shoot a semi-auto. They had a 9mm category at the time, but I didn't own but a Model 10 Smith and Wesson revolver. And so it was literally I drove an hour and a half to shoot 6 rounds at one table, and then 6 rounds to the door. So one thing led to another. I get home, and 30 days later, I get the mail, and it goes, it's a result. We had things mailed to us back then. Okay, we didn't have practice score and all these other things we had. So I opened it up and I looked at it, and there was like 52 people, 53 people there, and I was dead last. I'm going like, well, this is not going to happen again. So started practicing on getting more involved in the and practical shooting at the time. Bowling pins were actually fairly prevalent in my area at the time, different places in the state. And by the summer of '84, I probably knew of probably 4 or 5 clubs that were in the state that were shooting. And after that, I was going every single weekend, shooting a match somewhere in the Carolinas and Pennsylvania, or in Virginia. And I did that for 20 years. So me and my partner John Benton at the time. So John and I, we were putting 60,000 miles a year on the road, traveling,
Wow.
shooting matches, and so we got hooked on it really quick. And I would say because I shot my first state championship in '85, which was in Roanoke, Virginia, in the western part of the state, and I ended up winning C class, and I ended up winning an overall stage that year at the match. And one thing led to another. I was going like, okay, I'm ready to head off to the U.S. Nationals. I'm that good, and I was C class at the time. And I think I turned A class, and then in '86, I won the state championship. Started traveling around doing all the major matches up and down the East Coast, and that kind of started my career. Um, but in that period of time, but Jesus, it was. I mean, Dave. I mean, we were going such a transition period then, as far as guns and ammo and powder and compensators and springs, and it was only iron sights then that period of time. But I can't tell you how much changes were taking place literally every 30 days, from compensators, the companies coming out with
Wow.
holsters, um, new springs and followers for guns. It was just never ending, and it was constantly a battle of going out and buying and finding the latest product that somebody's putting out, because there wasn't a lot of ways of getting to that product, because of the internet and what we currently know today is jumping online and calling up Taryn Butler or Shooters, connection, and buying whatever you want. It's right
Mm-hmm.
there in the catalog, and you kind of waited to see, if your buddy buys something, go like, Dave, you bought this new spring and follower, does it work? And went, no, it's a piece of junk, Todd. I'm going like, okay, well, we're not going to buy it, but can we make somebody else make that product and make it work better? So then we would go on the phone and we would call this gunsmith, or we would call, somebody who was in the industry. We call Bill Wilson up and going like, hey, you guys ever thought about making this? And you were always trying to advance the guns to be able to keep up with the accuracy and the speed that we needed, in order to compete competitively, on a national level. Because up and down that time, I mean, like you were out there and you were going like, okay, I have a 3.5 pound trigger job, and it's the only trigger job I can get on my gun that's reliable. And something would happen to it, you send it to a gunsmith, and it would be $300. And you come back and
Oof.
another gunsmith say, "Oh, I can give you a 2.5 pound trigger job." Oh, great! I want a lighter trigger. And then when you feel your buddies' triggers, are you going like, "How did you get a 2 pound trigger job to work in your gun?" And you're going the entire time you're saying, "I don't know how this guy did it, but it's really nice, and I shoot really fast, and I'm more accurate with it." And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna call Brownells up, and I'm buying all the crap that you need to do a trigger job with. And I learned how to do a trigger job on my guns. And of course, then the guys wanted to come to me and like, Todd, how do you get a 1.5 pound trigger job? It's a science. It's a science, and you need to pay me a lot of money to do it. And so I started doing trigger jobs for my buddies, and it's only the guys who couldn't beat me, of course. So but
Of course.
it was a fun, exciting time in the '80s and the '90s. I go back and I show some of my friends that come over from time to time. I go like, "Hey, here's the gun I won the nationals with in '91." They're going like, "Are you serious? You actually won a match with this gun?" I'm like, "Yeah, I won a match with this gun." Well, God, this is horrible. This is horrendous. It's got a 14-pound recoil spring in there. There's a there's a 2.5 pound trigger on there that sucks. It's the original gun that I shot the match with. And I was going like, and the the gun shot super accurately at 50 yards away, because back then we shot tons of 50-yard standards at the Nationals, which were partial targets, 5-second drills, standing, kneeling, prone, strong hand at 25 yards, weak hand at 20 yards away, which is, you give somebody a target now at 50 yards away, they like freak out. We had one at Del Marva this past weekend. Well, I always say I shot it last Friday in the pouring down rain all day long, which was kind of miserable. Sucked it up, and the wife made me stay because she wanted to shoot. Terry wanted to shoot it. Um, so we had a 45-yard target, and I told Kevin McPhee, I said, dude, I have not seen a target past 40 yards away at a match in years. He goes, yeah, we're going to see more of it now, and I'd love to see more of that, because it was
Yeah.
amazing how many people had misses on it in our squad, or they would, look like buckshot on one. So it's the history of the game and how it cycles through. We see cycles through of accuracy and precision, and normally I see it probably in the regional. I mean, you may see this at Area 2, you may see it at Area 3, or you may see it at Area 7. They're the regional in the sense of how stage designers work everything, and how they operate and keep us on our toes for precision and accuracy, in the active shooting community anyway.
Yeah, I've even seen lately that, PCC shooters don't even care to see targets that far away. And I'm like,
Oh,
and you've
right.
got the weapon system to do it with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're 100-yard guns. I mean, you can,
Right.
I mean, you honestly can, you should be able to hit a 6-inch target at 150 yards away. My JP will do that at 150 yards away. I know my equipment, know my guns. I think we're losing a little bit of in the sport of understanding what precision is all about. Practical shooting, when it started back in the 70s, when Jeff Cooper kicked off with it, and started IPSC, and that kind of started the game. I mean, he's rolling over in his grave right now. Well, he probably rolls over every single year for the last 30 years since we put a red dial on the gun. Um, uh, he never liked the red dot, never liked the compensators. But I think the practicality of what he did bring to the table in the very beginning, I think really we should keep that legacy, still into the sport, in my opinion.
So which division do you think best encapsulates what he brought to the game?
Uh, I would have, I mean, the one and only is really, single stack classic,
Sing
you know,
Okay,
single stack, but it's dying, you know,
it
we have
is.
82, 85% of all these matches now are red dot. It's pretty sad that you go to a match and you look and it's kind of like there are 2 guys shooting L10, there are 5 guys shooting production, there's 7 limited shooters, and there may be a revolver shooting it every 10th match. So single stack is still the classic line, and I kind of hate to see the game actually kind of go away, in the sense where um, it is my favorite of all of the uh, categories out there to shoot. This year I'm going to be shooting a different division at the Iron Sight Nationals, because you're throwing them all in one. So USPSA headquarters have all put everything in one this year. So I would like to see that as a separate, separate match like we did for years. And when Springfield did it in PASA, I think they did it for 16 or 17 years, and Rob was heavily involved in that, and I was a big fan of it, and I went out and shot it, for years and years, and still got my ass whipped by Rob. So, but yeah, it is one of those things where how can we keep the Iron Sight life going, and throw it a lifeline somewhere along the way. So we may want to have to look at that down the road, and potentially have some has some other things to look at. So when it comes to red dots, I can honestly say that I am truly one of the pioneers of the red dot. There was only 3 or 4 of us that put them on guns back in the 80s. I put mine on, I believe, in the latter part of '88, and it was because of Brian Enos. Really, Brian Enos won the Bianchi Cup. I think the year before. It may have been '87. Time flies. I'm not sure. Brian would probably know that for sure off the top of his head. But it was either '87 or '88. Brian won with the red dot aim point on his revolver, and we're going like. So Brian was going like, well, dude, we might be able to put this like on a semi-auto. And I was going like, you think, Brian? Oh, dude, you gotta, man, the stars are aligned, and you should check it out, Toady. So they call me Toady over the years. And so Jerry Barnhart and we decided I'm gonna build one and put it on there. So we were trying to get mounts built. So I had my gunsmith who was down in North Carolina at the time, a guy named fabulous gunsmith named Blake Gann at the time, who was building all my competition guns. I was going like, Blake, I gotta build a mount, dude. We gotta put this on there. Well, what kind of dot you want to use? And I went, well, I don't know. Here's an ultra dot. This thing costs $69. Let's see if it'll hold up. And I know that Tasco at the time, they're called PDP2s. They were like pretty long, probably 5 or 6 inches long. A lot of them were huge. And we end up sticking a ultra dot on my gun. And I got a lot of rounds to it. In the beginning, I loved it. At the end, I hated it. I put it on, I take it off. And then the first time we got to compete together was up in Northern Virginia. So Jerry Barnhart showed up, and Jerry had a red dot on his gun. We had been communicating back and forth. What do you like about it? What's the problems you're seeing? All the mounts are falling off. We need bigger screws. We need, something that's not going to lose, batteries. Batteries were just dying. You could put them in there and they wouldn't last 10 hours. And we were trying to figure out how to stack batteries. I was making little bitty extensions to double up batteries in them that I had a friend of mine, a machinist, make. And so we're running this in there, and the batteries are going like, hey, I can get 20 hours now out of a red dot. Oh, that's cool, man. And so then we were messing with aim points. And so Jerry and I got to compete together up in Woodbridge, Virginia, I forget the name of the range up there at the time. But we went up there and we competed against each other for the first time with red dot. And I edged out Jerry with a red dot. And then we were still contemplating on a better design. So I went to an aim point very shortly after that, which was a bigger dot. The adjustment screws in it, I mean, they just absolutely suck. You had to almost re-zero your gun every single 150 rounds. And it was just a constant battle of what went on with the red dot world in that period of time. And so we finally got mounts correctly. Got the screws. We knew how to put them on the guns. And this was probably by the summer of '89. And we were going to area matches and we're shooting them. And I would shoot iron sights at one open, and then I put a red dot back on. And it was just controversy. We couldn't keep zero. We had issues with them, take them on and off. And then in 1990, the early part of 1990, we all kind of went to them, but we were also looking at how the stage designs were. And, since we were all iron sight shooters, we all kind of really understood iron sights, but the dot, we were still learning that. And so I go to the nationals that year, and literally a month before, I'm going like, I'm taking my dot off. I talked to Robbie. Robbie's going like, I'm taking my dot off. I'm shooting irons. And Jerry Barnhart showed up with the red dot. And Jerry had put the time in, got his dot working, and he kicked our asses. And that kind of started that point. He did that with a single stack gun at the time. And with that, when Jerry did that with a red dot, I think he shot a PDP2 at the time. And then from that point on, every single Open National Championship has been won with a red dot on his gun. And most of them have been Seymours over the years. I'll probably say 90% of those were Seymours. So one thing led to another. Then we went to high cap. high cap guns came into play in the summer of 1990, and I had built a high cap gun from Para Ordnance, and the Para Ordnance had picked me up, but I didn't shoot a Para Ordnance at the Nationals that year because it was being built by my gunsmith at the time. So Blake had built a gun, and we were trying to get the magazines working on it. It was a catastrophe trying to get that gun operating, but by the summer of 91, the bugs have worked out of it. And then I ended up winning nationals, winning the first USPSA nationals with a high cap gun and a red dot on it. And then that was the start of high capacity guns, winning national championships within USPSA. And that hadn't stopped a day. And of course, I worked with the company for 20 years. And after that 20-year period, I took a hiatus from working for gun companies. I was tired of running up and down the road. And I got a phone call about 5 years ago from Staccato. And at the time it was STI. And they go, "Hey, Todd, we want you to come on board with us. We're going to transition the company from STI to Staccato. And we're going to revamp the entire line of guns and make a better 2011 pistol." And said, "Well, I'd like to come on." I went, "Yeah, well, I got a lot of knowledge about 1911, 2011 pistols, so I'm kind of your guy." So one thing led to another. I came on board with them, and that has been kind of my story. Working in the firearms industry on the firearms side, anyway.
Now, in 1990, what was considered high capacity?
Um, we could get I could successfully get 18 rounds, 20 rounds in a mag in a gun that ran 100%. We did have big sticks, 170 millimeter at the time. Power factor was 175. Most of us ran like a 185 power factor because we thought the guns actually were calmer with the current compensators that we were using. And a lot of the comps were, I think I put on probably 5 different comps in 1990, different styles of testing along the way. And then we did have big sticks at the time that were, I would say I could get 28 rounds in a mag and somewhat work reliably, but we never trusted them because at that time, Chip McCormick came out with his high capacity gun at the time, and that became the next phase of the 2011 platform that Para had to deal with as a competitor. So when Chip McCormick came up with that, Chip launched that, and then Strayer Trip, which is at the time was STI, Strayer, Sandy Trip, and Virgil Trip, bought that patent from him, started putting that in there, and they could actually get 29 rounds in a mag at that period of time. Since then, of course, we can get magazines that can hold 29, 30 rounds in them, depending on the kit that you're putting in the gun and how you want to push your gun to a point where, because we're running, these things are like Indy cars now.
Mm-hmm.
Open guns literally are like Indy cars. Same thing in carry optics, and now we got limited optics, LOs that just got approved here on Monday. We're trying to work the bugs out of that. And for me, God, there's a lot going on trying to tune these things up and get them to where we want. We don't know if we want to go 5-inch barrel. Is it 4.5? It's 5.4. Do we go with a 6? I'm experimenting with, several different guns at this point right now, and I still haven't settled in on what I want yet.
Now, were you running the 38 TJ back in the 90s?
I did. We had so much problems with 38 Supers at the time. So when 38 Super, so I was one of the first guys that started competing with the 38 Super in the state of Virginia. There were several other pros: Rob, Jerry Barnhart, Michael Platsko, Chip McCormick, Jerry Barnhart. They had switched over in '86, I think. And there was a lot of problems with that cartridge because it was a rim cartridge. But remember, we're shooting single stack then. So we went to a high cap gun. At that period of time, we didn't start putting, feed ramps on, ramp barrels on guns until I want to say like 88. It was probably 88 or 89. And the problem was it was a rim cartridge. It just absolutely was horrendous to get these things to operate correctly with a light spring. We just couldn't get them to work. So you had to run a 13 or 14-pound recoil spring in the gun to keep that gun operating correctly, and be able to strip it off because it was a rim cartridge. So in 1993, maybe 92, I think 92, I woke up one morning about 3 a.m., which I did often, trying to figure out how to make these guns operate better. And I called a buddy of mine up. I said, "Hey, can I borrow your lathe?" He goes, "Yeah, sure, Todd." So I set up a fixture, and I took 1,000 pieces of 223 brass, and I chopped it off to 38 super overall length, and that's where the rimless cartridge came from for the 38 TJ. Now I have to go
Wow.
back and revisit that because Matt McLaren and I went together on that to try to make that actually be something that I think that we wanted to have the correct cartridge. And so I let Matt say, "Okay, all right, Matt, you go ahead and run that cartridge." I think he called it Matt McLaren MGM cartridge, but he only tried it for a little while, and it didn't take off. But I didn't like the design of it, so I wanted to really redesign the cartridge a little bit. So I changed the rebate on it, very similar to which was a 223, and I put a bigger hook on that, and so that made the webbing of that cartridge stronger at the base to be able to run a hotter load. And so, because at the time we were still running 175 power factor, and we needed that strength of that cartridge in order to be. But whatever it was, we're back. So, I forget where we were. What were we chatting about? We were chatting about something.
So you had just mentioned that you had redesigned the cartridge because you guys were still running 175 power factor and you needed the strength of that cartridge to manage those pressures.
Yes, and so so I got a hold of at the time I was sponsored by Hornady, and I went to Steve Hornady. I went, "Hey Steve, I got this problem, man." I said, "Can you make a cartridge for me?" He's going like, "Oh God, okay, what do you got?" So I explained to him what we were doing with it, and then one thing led to another. We started producing it, and I was selling about 2 million pieces a year. So,
Ooh.
so Hornady made that cartridge for me, and I sold that through different means for probably 10 years, and then things got busy in the firearms industry. Steve called me up and said, "Hey Todd, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to make that anymore, but let's go ahead and you know we'll keep it in play in case you need it." So I called up Starline, and my buddies at Starline, and they pretty much said, "Hey, can you do this for me?" And they went, "Ah, no problem at all. We'd be all glad to knock it out." So I think we still sell somewhere around 2.5 to 3 million pieces of that globally now, still popular. So it's I sell that directly through Starline. Even though Starline's been sold to Safariland, there's been some little ups and downs there, but competitors can still get it. So it was a straight wall case, a rimless cartridge that gave you the same exact extraction area as a 38 Super at the time, with a better webbing on it. So it was very similar to a 223 base version of that. So for me, it was a blessing in disguise. That cured all the magazine problems for high caps, especially in the para ordnance at the times. And then there were a couple of companies that came out. The Philippines came out with a rimless cartridge, which was that we know today, is a super comp. And they pretty much knocked off. They just made a 38 Super a rimless cartridge, is what they did. And a lot of people buy it, and it's still prevalent today. But 9mm, as you know, has become the primary cartridge really around the world for shooting major with, and also, carry optics, which has been, God, it's just taken off like no tomorrow. Single stack, people have gone to 9 millimeter in the single stack, world. And of course, we know production is all 9 millimeter. So I would say we're getting close to probably 70%, 80% of all cartridges shot will be 9 millimeter. I would say probably close to 80% of all cartridges are 9 mil now. So it's like it's cheap to get. 40 cal has gone away. No 45. There are still a fair amount of open shooters that do shoot the super comp and the 38 TJ, obviously, because I'm still seeing numbers out there.
Now, you can use the 38 TJ and the 38 Super Comp.
You can.
Okay.
It's the exact same cartridge. Yep. So,
Okay.
so the only thing different between a 38 TJ and a 38 Super Comp is that 38 Super Comp is a 9 millimeter extractor hook, where the 38 TJ is a 38 Super hook. So you got a lot bigger hook on the gun for guns where it's shooting fast. So if you're having problems with sticking in the chamber in the past with with the Super Comp, then my brass will cure that, and you're gonna get a lot more life out of my brass because it's built. So you build brass two different ways. All brass is done either soft or hard. That's it. There's no two other ways of doing it. You either do it 9 to 11 on the beryllium scale, or you do it from 11 to 13, which is on the military side, which they require for all of their cartridges, and how that's done. So I'm very, very familiar in how manufacturing goes of that. In all my years of being in the business, I've got to see literally, hundreds of manufacturing facilities, dealing with them within the firearms industry over the years, as far as parts and that OEM companies we have to go to. People I get invited to go. Todd, come by and see my place. You're here. We'd love to have you. Come by. So over the years, I have been very fortunate enough to see some really, really cool stuff and see how things are manufactured within the firearms world.
Yeah, I feel like that's why I said OG when I introduced you, just because you've been in the business for so long. You've seen that transformation from, like you said, guns that were not the best. They were good for the day, but by today's standards, nobody would buy them. It's like, no, thank you. So you've seen that entire transformation. And one of the things you mentioned before we get into USPSA presidency and stuff like that, you were talking about how you, Rob, Jerry, and everybody was talking about the red dots and working on things. But again, it's not like today where you can, oh, let me jump on here and send a quick email, or let me text them. I mean, you only had hardwired telephones or the mail. So how long of a process was this to go through this design phase and working through everything?
I would say, well, of course, at the time I was working full-time job. I didn't go pro until '95, so I mean, it was literally every weekend. I mean, there were weekends that I wanted to shoot a major match, but it was important to go to my gunsmith's and spend 2 days at his place designing or developing something in the gun or around the gun or on top of the gun that would make me more competitive a month from now. So you were constantly trying to figure out how to do things. I would say, I mean, we always figured it out. I mean, we figured out what we needed to do when it came down to, parts and pieces. We knew who were making them. Okay. So just think about bullets. Okay. So at the time, bullets in general we went from shooting a 170 grain Sierra bullet for major in 1 year to the following year that I was shooting a 124 grain bullet. And back in the day, they would call us super face because we were blowing up guns because they didn't have ramp barrels in them. So, 185 power factor, if you didn't use new brass, or at least if it shot more than 3 or 4 times, you're going to blow the case on it, with the powders that we were using at the time. So I can't tell you how many cases I blew in my career at that period of time. So I remember going to the Nationals in '88, maybe in '89, maybe it was '89, and I showed up with a Hornady flat point 124, and the word got around that Todd was shooting a 124 grain bullet. The ROs honestly did not want to R over me because they thought I was going to blow up the gun and I was going to injure the ROs. Because everybody's
Wow.
going like, well, you can't make that operate correctly. And at the time, we were shooting 150 grain bullets and 135 grain bullets from a company called CP up in a guy named John Rico, who was up in Pennsylvania, who sold hundreds of thousands and millions of bullets to us in the world with 135 grain bullets. It's a great bullet, but we thought 135 was kind of like, we can't go below that. We're going to blow the guns up. And then there was guys shooting 130 Sierras, and I went from a 135 to a 124 in literally in several months. It shot flatter. It was super accurate at 50 yards away. The gunshot an inch at 50. We finally figured out the red dot. The iron sights on them, that the width of the front sight we wanted. And it actually worked better with the lighter bullet because we were pushing that bullet faster. So we got better recoil back on the target with iron sights in that period of time. And God Almighty, once we put a red dot on it, everybody went to 124s or 115. So once we figured out that we could have supported barrels, powders back then were very difficult to be able to try to master. Believe it or not, I used to mix powders. And if
Oh,
you told
wow.
somebody that today, they were going like, you're going to blow yourself up. I'm going,
Yep.
yeah, no, but it might blow, but we're going to test it. I was actually mixing powders, two different powders, 80-20 ratio to make major with a powder back in the day. I'm not going to even mention anybody what it was because I want nobody going out there and do it and blowing themselves up. Because I blew up a couple guns along the way doing that, and it wasn't fun. And I just cracked the barrels on them. I mean, the slides and the frames were still good. So, but
Okay.
yeah, so I don't recommend anybody going out there and mixing powders, but we were doing some crazy stuff in that period of time and trying to figure out what was going on. I mean, if you blew a cartridge, you were blowing the grips on your single stack gun. You were just splitting them wide open. They were just like splitter
Wow.
away at the time. So yeah, so it was a fun period of time. And so now you just call up Atlas or you call up Staccato and go like, hey, I want to get an XL or I want to get an open gun belt. Shows up at your door with 6 magazines ready to go. The gunsmith's going to tell you the load he likes. It's going to tell you the powder charge, the primer, and that's what this gun does. At 50 yards away or 25 or whatever your liking is, and then you're off and running. So there is no more testing of anything. You already know that information is so readily available for everybody to be able to use. I mean, you're off and running. Here we go. So, and I
Yeah.
don't even want to talk about Dave. I don't want to talk about holsters. Okay. We
Oh,
talk about, I'm just going to tell you, I probably have 150 different holsters that I used when I started in '83 until where I'm at today, which is basically 40 years later. So that's for another
wow.
show, man. That's a way for another show.
While you were having technical difficulties, my wife came in, and I was like, I could sit here and talk to this guy for 3 days straight and not stop. I was like, he's just a wealth of knowledge from the beginning to now. So all of this fascinates me. The history of the USPSA and the actual shooting sport itself is fascinating to me. So
It really is. And I know USPSA, Donna Webb, who is a general manager, Donna has really gone out on a limb because I have been pushing for something that to keep the history and legacy of USPSA for years. I said, where these guys are dying, they're going away. They have valuable, archives that they have in their place. And why in the world can't we, put this in a place where everyone can see it at down the road? Because
yeah.
we're looking at almost 50 years of practical shooting. So with practical shooting, being something that is something that we need is very, very important.
I totally agree. I mean, I wonder if John Shaw is still around, John Kirkham, those original guys who won. But you, Jerry, Rob, Brian. I mean, that would be a heck of a forum to have, all getting together and be able to talk about the history and putting that down in chronological order. What happened when, and not just who won what, but what actually happened in the sport in those years and how it went from where was then to today. Because with the technology advances in the guns and the dots and the ammunition and the powder, I mean, everything has its light years difference.
Yeah, that is an overheating problem on my phone here. So I never have that
Oh,
problem, but the first time was a signal loss for some reason. But that is an overheating problem with my telephone. So I apologize for that.
that's
I know
okay.
I got to get off here. I got to get off here in about 10 minutes. Apologize for that. But I would love to come back on with you and do some major chatting, whether it be this week or next week or some probably next week. If you're available, you want to chat, I'll get on my computer at home. I'm out and about, but I do have something I got to jump on here in about 20 minutes. Um,
Okay.
so I would love to be able to chat with you. I love talking about the history of USPSA, where we have gone, where we're going at. I'm excited to see what's going to happen with the organization here, and with the new president. So we got a lot of great people running. I have a lot of friends of mine that have thrown their hat in the ring for running for the presidency on this year. I know that I think there's about 6 or 7 of us now. So I'm gonna throw my agenda up on the website either tonight or tomorrow. Just trying to
Okay.
fine tune a little bit. But I already posted everything on USPSA, where the presidential site is going to be at. So if you want to poke at that, look at that, and say, Todd, how in the world are you going to do that? Well, I got a plan. And so I think all of us have great intentions of growing the sport, and making this game more accessible for more people in a lot of ways. I would like to see some things done that hasn't been done in the past over 25 years. And I've known the first president, Dave Thomas, from the very beginning. And so those guys who started the game literally have worked their butts off to get where we are today. And there's some things we do really, really well at. And I think we know how to run matches. We have a rule book that you need a lawyer to follow you around in case something goes wrong. Good, bad, or indifferent, we have that rule book. And I know the NROI guys who do a hard work on that. My hat goes off to them over the years. And I actually have implemented some rules in the past over the years, that things that should have been done, in my opinion, should have been put in place. And it took them several years to get that done. I think some of the rules are, it's difficult to manage certain rules out there that as the competitors go through, you can figure out if you can go on page 49. Do you realize you could go to page 57 and you could arbitrate page 49 if you wanted? And those are things that only seasoned veterans out there really know how to go and do that. The biggest one thing, we just make your walkthroughs on your stage, just make them simple. I mean, just don't try to make them complicated. Make everything as simple as possible, and so you don't even have to open up that rule book. And that's my kind of my feelings about the organization over the years. But um, I think we have a better clue of what we can do to save more money. My ultimate goal, that I would love to see USPSA have its own facility. I would like to see HR. I would like to see a history and legacy museum there. I would like to see us be able to have our RO classes, junior programs, new programs. We could lease this out to local communities with law enforcement, maybe military that may want to use it. We need to be able to give back to that community, and we need to say that we are a legitimate organization. Don't get me wrong,
Yep.
but
Yep.
um, Sporting Clays has their own place, and SAS has its own facility, and Trap and Skeet. I mean, all these people in the shooting, USA Shooting, they have their own in-house place that you can go and visit and shoot and understand where board meetings are, where people can actually, understand what the organization is physically doing. Yeah, and I'm okay with, we just closed up Cedro Woolley and saved 40 grand a year, and Ted Murphy did that. Had a lot to do with that. And Ted's a super smart guy. He's a great businessman when it comes to accounting side. And for me personally, I think we have some really good board members out there, and some have been on there for a long time. They're great. We got some positions that are opening up, and I'm kind of curious to see how the new area directors that will be voted in here this year will be coming out. I think Area 6 is popping up. I know we have a couple of areas that are going to be an issue that we need to address, and the board members make all the rules. They make all the rules. Only thing that really I am as a figurehead, there are about 5 things that I have to do as a president or whoever the president is in order to get things done correctly. They're pretty simple. So the bylaws are all there for that. I don't make any decisions. Only thing I can do is help promote agendas that I hear in the field from members. And I am a member. I'm a life member, and I want to see those things be taken seriously. And I want all of us to understand that, what can we do to grow the sport, and what's going to happen down the road if we do not, if we're not able to shoot guns. What's the next evolution? We're going like, oh, Todd, we're always going to be able to shoot guns. Yeah, we might in some backwoods of Jerry Mitchell's house, okay, down in the bayou somewhere. Hey, Jerry, it's like 400 of them showing up down to your place. Where you kill all the alligators at? We're coming down. We're going to shoot a match this weekend. Come on down, man. We'll have alligators for lunch.
There you go.
So I think in general, the organization is sound. We have some good people that run it. Jake Martin runs Frontside. Jake is a wealth of knowledge. He's been there forever. And Troy, Troy can be a little cantankerous and kind of cranky from time to time. But he does do a good job on that side as a director. And but he can be a little cranky at times towards members and competitors, but maybe I can get in there and kind of smooth him out a little bit. So we have a good staff there. But like everybody comes along, everybody has a different vision, whether it's good or bad. I'll give it a shot, and we'll see what happens. So.
Okay, let's definitely pick a day next week, and let's talk about this more.
You got it. Let's do that. Yeah, we'll do it next week, and you'll be able to see my agenda pop up there, and we're throwing some old times too. Maybe we talk about the 90s and how the 90s were, how the transition of the 90s happened. So there was a lot that happened in the 90s also. So there was only 3 guys in that were winning everything. There was a guy named Rob Latham, there was a guy named Jerry Barnhart, and there was a guy named Todd. I believe that guy was Todd Jarrett. I think it was. So I put it on him in the 90s. So I was kind of keeping heel then.
All right. I'm looking forward to part 2 of this.
Yeah. Well, let's set up next week. I will shoot you some dates and some times, and we can do it, and we'll get cranking. And hope everybody enjoyed me chatting away here with you. So we shall be in touch. Okay.
Sounds awesome. Thanks for coming on, Todd, and I look forward to part 2.
You got it, man. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Until next time.
Don't be a little bitch.
Yeah.